Welcome back to the BDGE Dynasty Fantasy Football channel. As always, I am joined by Mr. Adam, Mr. Andrew over there. We are deep into the summer now, so startup drafts are, they're happening. They are happening in real time, thus we want to be part of the action, all right? So today, what we're going to do is run a full Dynasty startup, and by full, I mean not even half, like literally 12 rounds, so not a full Dynasty startup, but we're going to go through 12 rounds of a Dynasty startup draft, okay? All of us drafting from different positions, 12-teamer. We're going to be drafting against just the sleeper computer because I think the ADP is good enough. I think it's very similar to like keep, trade, cut, so I don't think it'll be any outlandish picks at this point. Rookies have been kind of accumulated into the rankings and whatnot, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to just draft 4 rounds at a time, and then stop and talk about the picks that we've made so far, what we saw on the board, maybe the strategies we were thinking about, how we pivoted, and maybe what we think we're going to be doing going forward. So we're going to chop this up into basically 3 different talking points as we draft. And if you guys want to get into a Dynasty startup, we are organizing them for y'all in the BDG Discord, all right? So it's all BDG people, all people that are serious about Dynasty. Free to join down below, link down there. Once you're in there, easy to figure it out. You can tag Sexy down there. He'll help you out, all right?
We're going to survive together.
We will make it through this tough period in our company's history. You guys ready to draft?
Very ready.
Several bad puns later.
Rome would have been so nice right there.
You thought you was getting Rome.
I was like, well, I actually didn't, but I'm like,
Bitch, you thought.
Bitch. But what if I just take the wide receiver 1 there instead?
Pause.
You thought I didn't fucking. What a pause job.
If only you would have done it at the end of the 4th.
Fast forward 4 rounds later, we have picked our teams. Andrew, you grabbed Josh Allen, Malik Neighbors, Drake London, and Tua. I, drafting from the 6th, grabbed Burrow, Kyler, Ayuk, and Waddle. And Adam at the 11th spot grabbed CeeDee Lamb, Anthony Richardson, Dak Prescott, and DJ Moore. So between the 3 of us, we have the exact same builds. 2 quarterbacks and 2 wide receivers each. Not a single running back, not a single tight end. That has become a little bit of like common theme in Dynasty. People that, are really, really like in the community now. No one wants to take running backs. Andrew, since you were first, you want to kind of talk through what you're doing?
Yeah.
Lord knows.
So honestly, I got saved a little bit because I forgot that we were doing 3rd round reversal because I thought I was going to be sneaky. But I ended up picking here at this 2 spot, and at least what I've started to notice for the way that I like to do these 3rd round reversals when I am picking early on is I typically like to go with the double elite quarterback early on. But in that early spot in a 3rd round reversal, I feel like it puts you out of this like range and out of this tier where it just makes your team awkward if you overreach on the quarterback or something like that. So what I did is I took the elite one in Josh Allen. I still have him as my Dynasty QB1 over Patrick Mahomes at this point. And then I went with the double elite wide receivers. So I was trying to be sneaky. Drake London.
Double elite. That's a tall task for 2 guys that aren't elite yet.
I think these guys can be elite. At least that's what we're projecting them to be. But I was trying to be sneaky because I took Malik Neighbors over Drake London, even though if I had to make the selection, knowing that one of them wouldn't come back, I would take London over Neighbors. But
would you have, if Kyler or Jordan Love fell to you at 211, would you have taken one of them?
I definitely would have taken Kyler. Jordan Love, I don't know as much, but Kyler for sure because I am very high on Kyler Murray.
Let me ask you this. I talked about in the video that's going to be coming out, well, it's already out now, of in the first part, this part here, I definitely get taking a guy like Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors. Do you think from sequencing, though, seeing what you have here, would you rather have had Dak Prescott at the 211 and then at the 402 taken Pittman, let's say? Would you like your build better that way? So let's say now, basically, would you rather have Josh Allen, Malik Neighbors, Drake London, and Michael Pittman, or the one you have now, Josh Allen, Malik Neighbors, Drake London, Tua Tagovailoa?
I think he wants the Tua, right? Because wouldn't he have just taken Pittman there?
Well, I'm asking, knowing what you know now.
Yeah, I would rather just have what I have right now. But I will say...
What the hell?
What? Because you asked me if I would rather have... I'm confused on what the fuck you just asked me.
I'm confused as well. That's why
I'm saying if you could go back, knowing what you know now.
Why would he change that when he just could have done that in the?
That's what I'm asking. Knowing what you know now, would you go back and redo it, or do you like your team that you currently drafted better?
What the hell?
I like my roster.
Okay.
I think is the answer to this question.
He doesn't know how to answer it.
But no, so I will say at the 211, there was really only 3 guys that I was looking at. It was Malik Neighbors. I thought about Jahmyr Gibbs there. So that was going to be against the meta that we all kind of were talking about. I did almost go with the running back, but I went Neighbors. I ended up getting London, saved myself. I thought I was going to be sneaky and just get him later, but he ended up falling anyway. So that's what I do. And then
311 feels late for London.
It was late. I shouldn't have got him there. That's why I said I got saved. And then I get Tua Tagovailoa, who I think can give you low-end QB1 production. He's not being valued as such. I was wanting to get either him or Goff. I value Tua just a little bit more than Jared Goff right now, but that was my plan, is in the 4th round, 5th round, go for the quarterback. But because there really wasn't anything left, it was just Tua and Goff, I felt like I had to take him in the 4th.
That's fair.
The reason I was asking is because, to me anyway, this is where I could be wrong. The way I view it is like I think Allen and Dak can give you both top 5 seasons at the QB position, and then I can get back-end wide receiver 1, mid-end wide receiver 2 range from guys like London and Pittman there, where I think right now, realistically, you could be looking at back-end quarterback 1, quarterback 2 production from Tua, as well as London and Neighbors, where I basically think that at 102 and the 211, you could have had a chance at getting 2 more high-end options, is I guess what I'm saying.
That makes sense. I mean, I see where, because from a win-now standpoint, you prefer that. I would say that lineup is a better lineup, but I think from at least the way that I like to do my startups is I like to think about just how can I get the most value on this roster, the most dynasty value.
Fair.
And I feel like having Tua and Neighbors is going to give you a lot more value than Dak and Pittman down the stretch.
Okay.
That's fair, especially with the youth. And honestly, so we can move on to my team. I took Burrow at 6. I think you could have argued for Lamar, like really any of these top quarterbacks. I just wanted to kind of get my QB1.
Yep.
On the turnaround, knowing, when you're in the middle, the 3rd round reversal is not that big of a deal necessarily, but I do think in this particular year, the middle of the 3rd round, you might get guys like Dak, you might get a T-Law, but you also might not, right? So and that's what happened here. So I could have gambled and went with like a Garrett Wilson, whatever, A.J. Brown, and then hope that one of them fell back to me. Honestly, looking at it now, I would have been fine with Tua there. And I thought about taking Tua at the 3-7, to be honest with you, but I was like, this feels a little annoying going with just like 3 quarterbacks off the rip. I think Tua is a great buy right now. I love him being at that tier because, and this was something I talked about in my previous video, I went Ayuk at 3-7. I took him over Olave, which was kind of a hard pull for me to do just based on the youth, but I like Ayuk's production right now, and I think you're getting like top 6 to 7 fantasy production for probably 2 more years out of him. And I don't even know if last year was a ceiling, because the amount of like pie that's getting split out there in San Francisco, if one of those guys does get hurt or miss time, then Ayuk's, shooting up. I'm just a really big fan of Ayuk there. Waddle at 4.6, I think he's being supremely undervalued for a guy who's produced as much as he has in his first 3 years.
New contract.
Right. The new contract spiked him up. I was talking about this again in my last video where he was wide receiver 15 on Keep Trade Cut, caught the contract. Now he's up to wide receiver 10. That same exact thing is going to happen with Tua.
I was just going to say, imagine the money that Tua is going to get.
Tua's going to get a 5 for $250 million, 5 for $240, whatever, and then he's going to go from QB fucking 16 up to QB 10, and his value is going to shoot up. You're not going to be able to get him in the 4th round of startup. So if I went with Ayuk 3-7 and then Tua had fallen to me at 4-6, I would have taken him there in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking. I'm trying to build on the back of a lot of QBs. Our starting roster is 3 wide receivers. We have 2 flexes, so you can get up to 5 wide receivers in your lineup, and it's full PPR with tight end premium. So I'm trying to stack as many of those like 12 to 16 point wide receivers in my lineup as possible that I feel really good about for the next like 4 or 5 years.
I think at that 106 spot, it worked out pretty optimally for you getting Kyler there. I think sequencing wise, like let's say you don't take Kyler, what would you have taken?
One of those other receivers, Garrett or AJ Brown, probably.
Right. So like if you look at sequencing to the point, if you would have taken AJ Brown there and then Tua, like I in particular think Kyler has a higher ceiling than Tua, and I think Ayuk could end up giving you not quite AJ Brown, but not far behind him in production.
Sure.
I like it better that way too.
Yeah. I like how it's built so far.
I will say to this, to the point, Andrew, like now it worked out because you were able to get Tua, but just imagine, for instance, if you're in the front part of the draft talking about the 3rd round reversal, let's say for anyone else too, like if team 3 snags Tua there, now all of a sudden you're probably waiting for your quarterback 2, right? You're probably not taking Goff at that spot.
I probably would have reached on Goff.
Would you have? Okay.
I would have
Well,
reached on Goff.
now, so that's actually the other point of why I like taking the 2-11 Dak is because then it's like now I reach on Goff and I don't like it as much. I think because at this point, after Goff, it's a pretty significant teardrop where it's like you get May, you get McCarthy, right?
I agree, but with Goff's new extension, I actually don't view him into that far off.
Agreed.
Like I think they're actually pretty similar assets.
I think they're
moving
both
forward.
just undervalued for the
Agreed.
most part.
Both of these guys can give you low end QB1 production.
Sure.
And that, this works out pretty good here too, because it's like I think in certain drafts you can see where like if Tua and Goff are both gone, then you're like, all right, what the hell? What the hell?
What the hell?
All right, we ready to cut this thing back on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's ride.
All right, let's draft the next 4.
All right.
346 minutes later.
What the hell?
Fast forward, we're 8 rounds deep now. The first pick of the 5th round was Zay Flowers. You absolutely love to see it. Kind of funny because we have to manually pause this after the 4 rounds. So we got to the 412. I hit pause. The computer drafted one player. We're like, we'll take it off. It was Josh Jacobs. And Adam had the next pick. So I took Jacobs off, paused, talked about it, resumed it. And then this time it didn't take Jacobs. It took Zay Flowers, who you wanted to take.
They
you ended up with
stayed
DK.
preying on my downfall.
And now you have 19 fucking receivers. So talk about your build.
Yeah, so at that spot I was going to take DK or Flowers, knowing that it was Josh Jacobs. It was going to be Zay Flowers, and then the foolery came around. What was interesting, though, at the 6'11 spot, so I was actually really wanting to get Mike Evans and Amari Cooper and just lock in production, given that I've already got what I believe is with Dak Prescott and Lamb, like going to win now. And I'm like, man, it just feels early. But I really didn't know if Amari was going to come back to me at the 8'11. It just felt way too early, though, to take Evans at the 6'11 and then Amari at the 7'02. So I took JSN, and those guys did end up falling back to me at the 7:02 and 8:11. I'm gonna build out the rest of my roster now.
So
getting a quarterback 3 and running backs now.
Yeah, one of the I think one of the like the conundrums in dynasty startups is like the idea of once you get to the 6 to 8 round, it's like you're either drafting these very proven veterans that are like close to the end, or super unproven rookies that are not like the top end talent.
Yeah.
Right, like you went DK, and you got JSN kind of sandwiched in there, Evans, Cooper. But like scattered around, the Diggs and the Debos are the Brian Thomases, the Rashee Rice, the Tank Dells, the Lads, and stuff like that. Do you think there's any like strategy worth zoning in on where it's like you pepper rounds 4, 5, 6 with maybe rookies or second rounders that have more upside, knowing that you're going to go for Evans and Cooper afterwards, because it's almost like they're like a farm system in a sense.
Yeah, I kind of talked about it a little bit too, where it's like if I don't have to in the first 5 to 6 rounds in particular, I don't want to take aging players outside of a very small list of guys.
Yeah.
Because you stay basically flexible with the ability to not have to draft the old guys. But essentially what happens in the 8th round, 7th round especially, is Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman. You start getting really more into that tier. Trey Benson. Like, we could be looking back in a year from now, and what they give you in production, what their market is, really wildly different than just at this point for going that and getting guys that give you 2-year production profile like Mike Evans, but could be top 12 receivers again for 2 years. So it's like, I definitely think that's the case. Obviously, there's certain drafts where maybe people in more of a redraft mindset are taking Evans and these guys ahead of ADP, but that's I think the best cheat code is to, at the 7th, 8th round, now forego basically stop drafting for age at that point.
Yeah.
Like at that point, just drafting best player available regardless of how long they are going to be on your team.
Yeah, so we are 24 picks deep combined, not a single running back off the board. I took the first tight end. I was hype about getting Kincaid there, because after Kincaid in the middle of the 5th, I'm like, I'm not really interested in most of these guys. I like the value for Mark Andrews down there in the 6th, but I think that's kind of like a sweet spot. If you're in the middle of the 5th round, you can get one of those top end tight ends that fall to you at the bottom of the tier. I'm pulling the trigger on that all day, because there was no one that I was super interested outside of Dalton Kincaid there. Love the player. I think now with Diggs and Gabe Davis gone, he should be in line for 115 targets or whatever.
Yeah, if DK and Zay were gone, I would have probably ended up taking Kincaid at the 502. Although I wouldn't have liked it that early, that's probably where I was going to go.
Here you go.
He was my pick in that round. I wanted him bad just because also I have Josh Allen, so being able to stack Kincaid
True
and
that.
Allen
That's
would've been-
that's a PPR fucking nightmare for opponents. Getting to the 6th, I think the last time that we did a dynasty startup, I actually grabbed both Tank Dell and Jaden Reed in that same startup, but I think they were around
Inverse.
earlier.
Oh, okay.
I think Tank Dell was at like the 412, 5-1.
because there wasn't the Diggs thing yet. Yeah.
Right. So I think I got him there. So now I'm getting him a round and a half discount lower. Jaden Reed, I also took in the 6th round last time. Now I'm getting it the 7-7. I think Jaden Reed is the most talented wide receiver on that team.
I would agree.
And I think this is the year that he like actually, kind of pulls away tied to Jordan Love, who's fucking 6th in the MVP voting right now, or 6th in the MVP odds. So I love Jaden Reed, love Tank Dell. They're kind of like dart throws that I think are a much higher percentage chance than just a dart throw. So a couple young receivers to stack with Ayuk and Waddle. And it's not like neither of them are going to put up production out of the gate this year. In full PPR, like I'm expecting double digits from Jaden Reed on a weekly basis. And then Levis there at 8-6. He's like one of my favorite investments in Dynasty right now. It's like he's going to have every chance to prove that he's okay at QB. So if you get a guy who is a starter by this time next year still, he'll probably be a 5th-round value.
To the Reed thing, in particular, he, I think, is the best case of the opportunity to thread the needle. If you look, what I mean by that is Lad McConkey, we got nothing.
Yeah.
And what he's really done, production, he's 0. And then everybody after that is like Terry McLaurin, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin. They better be producing because they're old.
Right.
Like Jaden Reed could give you the best blend of versatility as far as youth and production.
Yeah. I was happy about that. What do you guys think about the Levis pick there?
I think for me with your team, it definitely makes sense. Like at that point, you have to ask if you have those 2 elite upside QBs. Do you want to just pair a safe QB3 or an upside QB3 like Levis there?
That's why I was like on the clock and there was like Kirk was available.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, Kirk maybe has 2 years left. How many times am I going to put him into my lineup above a Joe Burrow and Kyler Murray? Probably not often. So if I'm getting 6 starts out of him over the next 2 years, what's the fucking point in not shooting for upside?
Yeah, it would just be like obviously like a worst case scenario injury replacement.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Like, I mean, of course, there's a path where Kirk starts a year for me or something, but I just felt like I'd rather take the shot. A little bit of upside. Still didn't love any value at like most of the positions left. I could have went with like a Cooper Kupp in the same strategy that I was talking about, where like get the veteran wide receiver, and then that way, like, I'm not banking on Tank Dell to produce for me this year with Stephon Diggs there kind of thing. That also could have played, and then I could have seen who fell to me at QB the next round. So if I'm, redoing things, maybe that would have been like the pivot for me.
But also, if Levis, not the upside here is if Levis ends up hitting, not only do you have a better higher end quarterback 3, but you now have flexibility to trade away a quarterback and really boost the rest of your team much higher than Cooper Kupp.
Sure, the value wouldn't have been there, but the Cup pick would have been like for the win now, like
100%.
Trying to go for the championship. Where Levis, I don't know, gets you there right now.
Yep.
Value wise, future definitely.
All right, Mr. Andrew, let's talk about your 4 picks.
Yeah, so I went with Pickens and Addison right there at the turn. Pickens and Addison right there at the turn. So I get 2 wide receivers, young guys, keeping up the same theme of the young wide receiver build that I'm going with. Both of those guys are in the same tier for me, so probably interchangeable. If you want to take Addison first, go ahead. If you want to take Pickens first, go ahead. Doesn't really matter. But based on the ADP, I felt like Addison just was least likely to get selected there by the CPU. But as we came back around, I was going out of that Addison pick, and my hope was that I would have one of 5 guys fall back to me in that 7th round. And the list of guys was JSN, Jonathan Brooks, Keon Coleman, Jaden Reed, or Bryce Young. None of those 5 came back around to me. So Nick snipes me on Jaden Reed. CPU snipes me on Bryce Young right before my pick. And with a 60-second clock, I went into tilt mode. So
Why you got to do Deshaun like that?
I mean, looking at it, I don't hate it. I would much prefer Bryce Young to Deshaun Watson right now, just based on where I think their values can go in the future. I think if Bryce Young has a good year and Deshaun has a good year, Bryce Young is going to see more of a value increase in the community.
To be fair, though, Deshaun at 7-11, I feel like is a good pick.
He's a fine QB3 to throw in on my roster, so I felt fine. I mean, it's not like I made a bad pick there, but I definitely wasn't excited that I didn't get any of the guys that I wanted to fall. And then the pick that I think if I could go back and get it back, David Njoku, it feels a little bit early for Njoku here, but I saw the Watson pick and decided to just get the stack there, and I needed a young tight end to keep with this build. And I know Njoku's not like super young, but for the tight end position, he's younger than a lot of the guys, and they play longer.
Let me ask you though. You said you were gonna, if you were to go back and do it different, what would you have taken at 7-11?
I was looking at Benson. I was looking at Trey Benson. I also think if I could go flip this on its head, I mean, I guess you're just making a wish that you get Bryce Young. I think.
Okay, but it wasn't like Mixon or Kittle were going to be your pick, right?
No.
Okay. Well, the one thing I will say, at least what I do now with the CPU, it's a little different. But when I'm drafting against like people in general, if I'm closer to the turn there, just a thing to keep in mind for everyone at home too. Like if I see that team in front that I'm getting ready to have come in front of me on the turn already has 2 quarterbacks, like although you're drafting your quarterback 3, I might be a little bit more risky in thinking I'll get Watson at 802 obviously Mixon and Kittle didn't go in front of you.
Yeah,
but what if that would have been Benson, for example? And now
Right.
you got sniped. That's just something little small to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I ended up getting the Cleveland stack there.
Love it. The Browns are bike, baby.
Hey, look, man, we'll see what it does. But I really am disappointed not getting Bryce Young. He's definitely my favorite pick, like this far down in that range. Like I'm really taking a lot of Bryce Young this year.
If Jaden Reed got picked at 7-6 where Ramondre went, Young was my pick for sure.
Yeah, this is, I feel like, really, really good value on Bryce Young. I don't know, people are going to say I'm too high, but I love the opportunity for Bryce Young this year.
Now, let me ask you this, though, because I obviously, to your point, I agree. Because he's young, if he has a bounce back year in year 2, because of where his value was a year ago, we're looking at something good. Let me ask you this. If Bryce Young has a bad year, how far do you think he can go down?
Not much.
Okay.
I don't feel like much. I mean,
if I feel like
how bad are we talking?
Well, I just feel like a quarterback that now has 2 years of like, oh wow, it's not very good.
like bad enough that like Carolina wants to go draft another quarterback next year.
Well, like how good does he have to play for them not to feel certain about their team in general?
I mean, if he goes out, he gives you a pretty mediocre year. I mean, I feel like maybe you have a Bo Nix pass him, maybe somebody like that if they have a good year, Will Levis. But other than that, like below him is talking like Minshew, Russell Wilson. Like it doesn't feel like there's much more to go down.
Well, right
without being out completely.
No, but to that point though, the 7-10 is Bryce Young. Gardner Minshew's a 14th round pick.
Yeah, like QB rankings are kind of irrelevant in that conversation.
Yeah,
that
but I would say that I understand that you're spending startup capital, but in a quarterback market, you're most likely trading QB for QB anyways. So depending on where you're drafting them doesn't necessarily matter, I don't feel like.
Well, I guess the point is if he falls out of...
Does that make sense?
I think more so at this point, like it's not the quarterback market anymore. I think he just becomes more of an asset that you don't want to have in general.
I mean, if he has a bad year, I kind of feel like he becomes immovable.
Right. He becomes parked on your team.
Yeah, I'm willing to gamble on him at this price and see if he collapses, but...
Well, no, I mean, I'm not. I'm just saying that I think while he does have the upside to go high, I think that going into year 3, if we're looking at like really gloom and doom, it could be a lot of downfall too.
So we did this on the last episode. Let's put a probability on it. Like probability chance that Bryce Young increases in value next offseason or by next offseason.
I would say 65 to 70.
55%.
Okay, so you're a little bit less, but 65, 70%, you feel pretty good about Bryce Young.
Yeah, because being much better and increasing in value are two different things. I think if he takes like a step up where he's not like the worst fucking QB in the NFL, and there's no reason why he shouldn't because they have, new coaching, new offensive line, new weapons there for him. I think if he takes a step up, then the hype train will really start, and he'll be, I don't know how much realistically, if he has a really good year, obviously he's going to shoot up. If he has a step up type year, he might move up a round, maybe 2 rounds.
I've been throwing this stat line out for a month now, where I feel like a good year, an improvement year for Bryce Young. It's not elite, it's not anything fantastic, but if he goes out and he gives you 3,500 passing and 20 touchdowns. That's like what Baker did last year.
Yeah, that would be a good year for Bryce.
If he goes out and does that, are we talking about Bryce Young in that Jared Goff, J.J. McCarthy conversation right there?
Jared Goff, no.
Yeah.
Drake May, I think maybe more like Drake May. Because here's the thing. I think if that's the case.
That's not that much of an increase for Bryce, though.
That's what I'm saying. I think he's going to play like good, and I think he'll move up 1 to 2 rounds, which is right around that Drake May area.
That I think is the point, actually, is like if Bryce Young has a really good season, he'll get into the Jared Goff to a tier. I just think, though, really what startups are showing me in general right now and where people are in market is like they want to get the top 15, 17 quarterbacks, and then it's like, man, how much do I care about the quarterback position in general? So if Bryce Young, to your point, has that's a very good step-up year for him. It's a signal up, but he's still probably quarterback like 20 to 23 in production.
I think we need to see some spike fucking weeks too.
Like Levis type shit where you saw
if he goes 30, even like Baker, right? Like because Baker was pretty inconsistent at times too. Like if Bryce Young goes for 3,500 yards and there's no spike weeks, realistically, you're not getting any fantasy startable.
It's a bunch
weeks.
Of like 220 weeks with 2 touchdowns.
Not even, yeah, like 200 yards a week basically, yeah, and a touchdown, 1.3 touchdowns a week is not fantasy usable. But if he has multiple like Bama games where it's like 370, 3 touchdowns and like 20 on the ground and maybe a score or something mixed in with some bad games, then you're like, okay, we got something to build on here.
That's exactly. If he has that type of production, sprinkled in with the moments of I think I can see it for Bryce. That's probably a good
That's
point.
what we
That's
need
why
for the
I was
market.
so upset about
Market
getting
needs that little hit of
sniped.
crack.
Was because I believe that Bryce can get to that McCarthy Goff range that I was mentioning. I think he can get to that range. I believe in the talent that much. Whether
Fair.
he does it or not, I don't know. But
Right.
everywhere that I am buying Bryce Young, because I've said it on this show 100 times, I am buying him everywhere I can get him right now at the cost. My hope is that he does that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm buying for.
Sure.
All right. Bitches, you ready to draft?
Let's ride.
Last 4 rounds.
Thousands of tears later.
My guy.
All right, so we ended up extending the draft through 15 rounds just because I kind of felt like the rosters we were getting at, we weren't drafting like tight ends or running backs. So I was like, I wanted to, see how it would play out. Furthermore, after the 8th round, I think it's all a little dicey. I feel like this is where the ADP starts to get a little wonky here.
It's the take your shot range. It doesn't matter where these guys' ADP is at. You just take the guys you want.
At which round in particular?
8th.
Yeah, like
Oh, yeah.
double-digit rounds I feel like are a little bit crazy.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like in real drafts, too, you could see, to your point, like 3-4 round swings on some of these guys, depending on who you're drafting with.
For sure. I mean, you went 3 QBs from
Yeah.
10 to 15.
Yeah, so my pick, 902 was pretty easy. I was actually going to take one of Kamara or Najee there. I was much rather Najee Harris. I feel like Kamara at this point, you're just banking out a bunch of catches. Like his efficiency last year was kind of trash, but I feel like for fantasy, he might give you 1 or 2 more viable years. I get Najee. Then at the 10, 11, I feel like at that point, I just can't pass on Penix. I know he's just kind of a lotto ticket, and even though this is a team I want to win now with, I knew I could get probably a couple of cheaper options at QB, which I did later on.
I thought about taking him at the 10-6, but I already had 3 quarterbacks, so I was like, doesn't. I feel like I don't want to like draft as if I was. This is gonna sound dumb, but like if I was in a real startup and these ADP started to fall, I might have gone like Levis 8, Stafford 9, Penix 10, just for the value play, obviously. But I wanted to start kind of
Filling
messing shit up. But Penix there in the 10th round is a fucking steal.
Yeah, like, for example, if you took your quarterback 4 in a real startup, especially, I just want to give this context. So you took Levis at 806. Now in the 9th round there, let's say you took Stafford or Penix. Well, let's say Penix. So you take Penix there, then it's Baker, Cousins. Now all of a sudden teams that don't have a quarterback 3 might start panicking, and you could have a little quarterback run at that point. But because that didn't happen, I'm taking Rodgers and Wilson in the 15th and the 13th because I needed a true quarterback 3 just if I had to put one in if A-Rich gets hurt again or if Dak or him is hurt. But then also at that point, like, okay, I'm going to take tight ends in that range. Let's just say this for instance. After Sanat now, or likely comes off at the 13-10, what am I going to take now? Jatavian Sanders? I think I could trade a quarterback to a team that might be needy, any one of those guys for a reasonable tight end somewhat in the season. So at that point, I just stopped drafting.
I do like
tried to draft
Russ.
a tight end.
I feel like Russ gives you like 2 months of gameplay. You could probably flip him for like Pat Fryermuth.
That's exactly like I think the point where I draft both of those guys there. I have an extra quarterback 3, cheap, older option, and both of those guys give me flexibility to wait till Penix comes in place.
Yeah, so I mean, again, like there's no cheaper time to draft starting QBs than in the startup draft. So if this shit actually plays out in real life like that, you kind of just pepper that position and figure it out. Afterwards, I was trying to stack wide receivers, so I added Christian Kirk as a guy that I really love with the value of 9.7. I think he's the one there in Jacksonville. He's the only one with real chemistry there.
Yeah.
A lot of targets open up. Willing to take the shot on J-Mo. That might fall through. He could be a 19th round fucking pick by this time next year, but I didn't think the price was too steep. Grabbed my first 2 backs in Zach Moss and Jerome Ford, who, it's late in the draft, obviously, but I think both of them are going to give me, 10 points per game this year off the rip immediately, and that's really all I'm looking for. I can figure out the running back position afterwards. I like Burton. I like Palmer, whatever.
What I was doing really was just taking young upside on wide receivers really the rest of this way, and I got a couple young running backs in there as well, but ended up really going on a run there where you see I took Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Dontavion Wicks, Curtis Samuel. I think all these guys, specifically Curtis Samuel, I feel like Curtis Samuel is so undervalued in startups right
I
now.
like your 9 through 15.
So I did that, and then Ty Chandler, just sprinkle him in there at the running back because I'd already punted the running back so far. You get Tajay Spears, Chase Brown, Ty Chandler. You're kind of just building a running back room by committee. All of these guys are pretty young. They have some upside in their backfields. The backfields are a little bit ambiguous. So that's really what I was doing with that one. But I kind of, the more that I'm doing these startup mocks, these startup drafts this offseason, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound crazy, but I want to know your guys' opinions. But I almost feel like there's a real potential strategy out there where we know that the running back trade market is so much cheaper than the running back startup market. We know that. Like most of these guys, like you get guys up there like Ramondre Stevenson, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, like where you might have people in your league that are willing to sell you those guys for an early second or a late first. And it feels like punting running back far in a startup, drafting a bunch of skill players, and then trading for the running back after the startup is almost getting those running backs at a better value.
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of looking around the board, and I think you're right with that because Ramondre, no one's giving you a first for him.
No.
But if you're trading Jaden Reed, no one's giving up Jaden Reed without probably getting a back-end first for him. I think the trade value on these players is way higher. So, like, David Montgomery.
The startup value is way higher.
Way higher than trade value. Right. Like, no one is giving up a first for Demont or Tony Pollard. Will Levis. Like, you're not trading a second for Will Levis right now. Like, there's just no chance that happens. So when you start putting him around other positional players, the price goes up for those players, goes down for the running back. So I agree with what you're saying. Like, and I think, we all kind of, our actions dictated that as well.
I really do believe, like, I wish some of the startups, because I'm starting to see it more and more as I do more of them this offseason, but I wish some of the earlier stuff that I did this offseason, I wish I would have, like, really committed to fading the running back position. And then just as we get closer to season, you get training camp and things like that, that's when you just kind of trade and go get those running backs on your roster to kind of set a lineup. But it just feels like you have to pay full price for the running back in a startup draft, but you can buy them at a discount in the trade market.
So the one thing to keep in mind, while obviously, my team's this way, if you look at most of my mock drafts or startups, if this offseason it's going to be this exact same way where I don't draft a running back till really late. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is it's not always a free market at the running back position in that way, meaning this, like right now, no one's setting a lineup in June. When it's training camp, week 1, everybody believes that they can compete for the most part. So while Montgomery, it can be had for early seconds, nobody's giving you at that time a healthy David Montgomery for an early second. So a lot of times you have to basically at least make sure you piece together like a startable roster so that you can get through to the point where now it's like, all right, my team is left, and there's teams out there that either by injury or whatever are willing to come off of these running backs. Because it's not just – a lot of times when you get to that point right before week 1 or the first month of the season, people won't trade, even though, to your point, like Derrick Henry, Montgomery, Pollard, they're not going to just let you have them for a second-round pick because you need one right then.
Right. But that's also why, like, in a strategy like this, I'm sprinkling in the Tajay Spears, the Chase Brown, the Ty Chandlers.
Sure.
Like, you sprinkle those guys in because they can have value going into the season. If you got to plug Tajay in as an RB1 for a week, then why not? If you have to plug in Chase Brown as an RB2, why not? Like, but
right.
By fading the position, you are getting overweight or so much stronger at a certain position on your roster. Whereas for this roster, I feel like it's my wide receiver room. My wide receiver room is really strong, really deep, really young. You also have, Tua, Josh Allen. I feel like you have a little bit of a positional advantage.
No, I wasn't actually telling you should be drafting the running backs earlier. I was just saying the biggest thing and the hardest part is, I guess, timing of it, finding the right suitor, the right time of it. But to the point, we all agree in our action show that I don't want to invest startup prices at running backs unless I'm getting an extreme value.
The more and more and more and more, and I'm sorry I keep poo-pooing on your Browns, but the more I look at this roster, Deshaun Watson, David Njoku, they stick out as a sore thumb, man. Like, they just don't feel like they fit the rest of this roster.
But
wait, why?
I was going to say, what would you rather do there, though? I guess is the question.
Well, I'm just saying I don't know if they necessarily fit the. Do you guys feel differently? I mean,
well, no, I'm just saying you were talking about like running backs not being valued, and then you point out the QB tight end.
Yeah, but you got a bunch of young guys, right? Like we have young high upside, London, Pickens, Tua, Addison, Spears. And I feel like Watson and Njoku, neither of those guys are young nor have a ton of upside, I feel like.
I think, well...
It just doesn't feel like it fits the build.
Njoku definitely has upside. I think we could at least agree to that, right? He was tight end 5 or 6 last year. I think that's the point, though, overall in startups, is the 7th, 8th round is when I start deviating from just that. Because if you just stick to youth at that point, you could totally have an asset that goes to 0 or close to it.
Who actually would you have taken there differently now that you're seeing the board?
I wish I could get Bryce Young. And
you said Benson. Would
maybe
that have
Trey
been one?
Benson. Maybe Trey Benson. I think, honestly, I like the roster a little bit better.
But that would be going to grab the running back around earlier. You just said don't do that.
Yeah, but it's another one of those young upside. And also, 8th round isn't crazy high to draft the running back. But I don't know. That's maybe that. But other.
So what about, like, would you have.
Like,
are you saying would you rather have had Will Levis, Trey Benson?
I was going to say, I almost feel like Will Levis fits the team build, the direction of this team better than Deshaun Watson does.
I can get behind what you're saying. I get where you're coming from. I just think at a certain point, especially quarterback, I feel like age gets really overplayed. Like, I don't need to have young assets.
Watson's not like, Watson's not at Kirk Cousins' age. It's not like you took a 36-year-old.
Right.
But the roster that I have, at least the way that I'm viewing it, it looks like it's a young roster that we could be competitive this year, but you're more so playing for like the next year and the following. Like, you could be a really strong roster.
I get you.
And so it's like 2 years down the line.
Your team sucks, bro. Sorry. It's just.
No, I think it's a good team
What
except
the
for those two
It's
picks.
starting to feel like a lot of remorse on this team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Levis, and if I go Levis and Benson, I'm loving this roster.
All right, there you go.
That does fit a lot better for
Levis
your
and
team
Benson.
for sure.
I mean, and I feel like the other thing there is you're not changing the value. Like, it's not really that much different as far as the way you're looking at your roster and value. So I can get behind that.
And then I
also just
I
to the
pun
point,
my tight end down to my guy Ben Sinnott.
Gosh, that I think like, you're going to be so much better off with Njoku than Benson.
Yeah, we did you a favor there.
But
I think it's Sinnott. I actually looked it up.
Is it?
Yeah,
Is
it's
it?
Sinnott.
I heard a podcast the other day where the person kept saying that, and I was like, he's got to stop.
It's Sinnott.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been wrong. So you've
so
been
you
wrong.
so you
Romo
so while you
Doomsday.
drafted Troy, you're really higher on Ben Sinnott than anything.
Yeah, I really like Ben Sinnott. That's my guy.
That is always the cue for the end of the video. Whenever you start talking about
What the hell?
All right, we're wrapping it up there. 15 rounds of a Dynasty startup. Let us know what you think about the teams. And, of course, if you want to get into your own Dynasty startup, we are organizing them for y'all down in the Discord. Free to join the Discord, obviously, but the Dynasty Leagues are buy-ins along with other people that are in the BDG audience, okay? So subscribe to the channel. If you are new here, hit the button that looks like this, and we out here.
Smoochies.
I'm going to put that on the thumbnail.